Hey everybody, Charlie Stevens here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another guitar lesson. So in our last lesson, we learned the tune What I Got by Sublime. We learned how to play the chords, we learned how to do a certain bass, strum type of a rhythm with that. So today I'd like to teach you the solo. Okay, so this is one of the first solos I ever learned, one of the first songs I ever learned, and it's a super easy and fun solo. So I think this is a good solo. I think it's tasteful and cool. I have seen it get some flack online because he says he's going to play like a riot, like right before he takes off into it, and then it's apparently some people don't think it's like high energy enough to match the lyrics that come before it. But I do think it's tasteful and fits the tune. Nice simple little thing. So it starts out in the minor pentatonic scale, okay? So we're in the key of D. And this song could be considered D mixolydian more so than D major. We learned about the key of D major recently on this channel. And we have a C sharp in that. And later on in the solo, he plays a C natural, which we don't have. Okay, so this is something called D mixolydian mode, but we don't need to really worry about that too much. Anyway, it's very common to play the blues scale in a mixolydian type of context. If we're playing over a D chord in a mixolydian context, we can use the mixolydian mode, but we could also just use the minor pentatonic scale or the blues scale, or the major pentatonic scale. We have a couple of options. It's a really good, mixolydian is a very friendly thing to jam over, which is why we see it in rock a lot of times. And it's sort of the basis of the blues as well. So we'll dive into all the theoretical reasons behind all that stuff another point. But in this solo, we'll see some mixing between the blues scale, the major pentatonic scale, and the mixolydian mode. He kind of is mixing elements of that. Okay, so some of the stuff we've talked about, some of it we haven't yet, and that's okay. We're going to kind of relate some things that we know into this and just kind of learn the solo for fun. So I'm really thinking about this as being D minor pentatonic to get going, or the D minor blues scale, adding in the blues notes. Either way, this shape right here is what I'm thinking about to get going, okay? So I have to know that my note D is here on the 10th fret. And, well, I know that it's an E string. I know the 12th fret repeats itself to E again. So E flat D. That's how I knew that this was here, and that's how I found this shape, okay? So he doesn't start right at this lowest note D, though. He actually slides into the shape like this. That's how the solo starts, okay? So I do think about it as being in that framework, even though we don't start there. We slide using our third finger into the 12th fret, okay? Kind of arbitrary where you start the slide from as long as you get here. I recommend not starting too far away because it's tougher to land right where you're going, and if you do it too slow, it won't sound right either. I can do that long slide if I do it in the right amount of time, or I can go a shorter one. Doesn't really matter, use your ear for that, okay? But one tip I have, if you are far away, my tip for sliding is not to watch your finger make the journey, but to look right at the target fret. So I'm going to look at the 12th fret and slide my finger right there, regardless of how far I come. So this is a great little slide. It actually goes through the blues note. So I think that's why this is a very common place that solos start, and we slide or bend from there to there a lot. I think it's because if we were to play the note in the middle, even though we don't really hear it because we're going through it, if we were to hear it, it's that blues note that we like anyway, right? So I think that's one of the reasons why this is a very common way to slide into this particular note. Okay, so then we go through the scale, we slide in the 12 on A, then we go through the scale, okay? So then next note in the scale is 10 on the D string, and then 12 on D, and then 10 on G, right? So that's just like starting from here to there, which exists in the middle of this scale, right? With me so far? When we get here, we're going to do a bend. So this is a very bluesy trick of mixing the two thirds, okay? So in a D major chord, we have an F sharp note. In a D minor chord, we have an F natural note. In blues and rock and bluegrass and lots of styles of music, we mix the two together, usually from the minor into the major, okay? So this is one of the most important concepts in soloing, in my opinion, is learning how to mix the minor and the major third together to get some really cool sounds, okay? So he's actually going to do this again in the solo later on, where he actually gives us the major third. This time it's not quite there. He bends it ever so slightly, where it ends up being in between this F and this F sharp. See how it pulls it out just a little bit slowly too. It's not, I don't just go for it, right? And then you kind of pull it out of tune a little bit. Okay, and then you kind of bail out. You gotta land right before that really gets where it was going. And then when we land, we're back on the 12th fret of the 4th string. Okay, and then we're going. I do a pull off there. I think he might pick them and then do a hammer on, actually. That does sound right. I've always done that though for some reason. That sounds good though. I think it might be that. Okay, bend, and then we do either the pull off or the pluck pluck hammer. Either way, your choice. Okay, now we're going to the next part. This part uses thirds. Okay, so thirds is an interval, meaning they're 3 notes away in the scale. So this is a D and an F sharp, because that's the third note in the key of D. D, E, F sharp, D, F sharp. That's why we call it thirds. And I'll do a whole lesson about intervals at another point, so don't worry too much about this. But this is a very common thing that we can do, is play thirds. Okay, so it's at 12 and 11. Okay, and then we slide that same shape down 2 frets to 10 and 9. Okay, this is really like a C chord. So this is how we know that this is not in the key of D major, but probably D mixolydian, because we have this kind of thing where we're going. And then we get to this third here. Now this is a different type of third. This one's called a minor third, and it's a little further apart. So now instead of them being on the next fret with this one, there's a fret in between them. Okay, so it's 12 and 11. 10 and 9, 9 and 7. And then when we get here, we do that one twice. Okay, these can really be thought of as pieces of chords. Really, it's D, C, G, G, okay? Those notes in there, those are in the middle of these big shapes. So you could play them full. Okay, now I know we haven't learned these shapes yet on this channel, so don't worry too much about that, but basically that little thing outlines a chord progression. D, C, G, G, so it's like he added a C chord on the way to the G. Okay, kind of a cool trick to throw in there. And that definitely indicates this mixolydian feel, not the major. So I just wanted to point that out since we recently learned about major. We haven't learned about mixolydian yet, but we will. And when you start learning about that and you understand that, this is an example of that. But don't worry too much if you're not following that. Basically, we're just going to go 12 and 11, 10 and 9, 9, 7, 9, 7. Okay? Next we go into this lick. This to me is kind of like the G run in bluegrass. Similar, okay? It's a very common musical thing, so hopefully that sounds familiar to your ear. But this is using the minor to major third trick that we talked about. This is the same note he was pulling and bending in between. Now he's actually going to do a hammer-on into the major third. So now we're going from minor to major. Super common device. This part can be thought of, once we get to this note, all of those exist in the major pentatonic scale for D. Minor, now we're in major. So another way to describe this is he's mixing the major and the minor pentatonic scale. Okay, so it's a hammer-on from 10 to 11, and then 10 on the B string, 12 on the B string. So 10 and 11 on G, 10, 12 on B, and then landing on 10 here on the high E. Okay, then we go to 12 on B again. Bum, ba-da. Play it normal, and then you play it again and pull off. Bum, ba-da. Okay? And then he plays 12 again, he bends up to 13 and back. Okay? So those two phrases. And then, okay, then he bends up. I'm pretty sure he does a bend from 12 to 14. My string gauge is too heavy. I just can't get there. I can tell that I would probably break the string if I tried to force any more than that. So you kind of have to learn to accept your limits. I have medium gauge strings on, and on this G string I can bend maybe a half step, but I can't bend a whole step, 2 frets. So your options would be to either slide instead, or perhaps you have lighter gauge strings. You might be able to crank this 12 all the way up to 14 and just give it a good bend. So you can try that. Be careful not to break your strings if it doesn't feel like it wants to go. But if you have lighter gauge strings than me, you might be able to do that. For me, and possibly you, depending on your string gauge, it might be a better idea to slide to get that, okay? Another thing we can do, though, is I can grab it here. So this is a G that goes to an A, right? Well, I have a G here on my B string on the 8th fret, and I can bend that one up because the B string has less tension than the G string. That one I can get to bend. Okay, my elbow went way up here when I did that. That's funny. It's a little tricky. Normally I would just, if we were playing an electric guitar or something, I would just do it right here. That's where, where the note is. So going down here is a little bit trickier, but possible. But that's just kind of a way of dealing with the tension of these strings, right? So that's not necessarily the best way to do it. You can slide up like that, okay? When I was a kid, I actually made up my own way to do this, where I did it like that. Or maybe my teacher showed it to me like that. I honestly can't remember. But I had always played it like that. Yeah, which I think kind of sounds cool. So I make that one kind of shorter. And then I wait and go ba ba da ba da. So that's 12, 10, 12 on the G string. And then I do that little half bend again from 10, kind of pull 10 out of tune on G. And then I land here. Okay? So that's the way that I had always done it, and it gets rid of this issue of having to bend the 12th fret on the G up further than I'm able to on this guitar. So maybe that's why I adapted to play it like that. Okay? So I thought I'd share that with you. So the real way is probably to bend that if you can get it. You can also slide or go down to 8 and bend up to 10. Okay? Kind of like that way. That way's nice. And I was just listening to it, and then he plays this exact same solo a second time in the song while he's singing the chorus, possibly on a different track probably. And that one he does a pre-bend there, actually. Why don't I cry when my dog runs away? Okay, so that's an option too. And depending on the context, so anyway, what I'm doing is bending up the 12th fret and then releasing the tension to come back on the G string. Okay, that's called a pre-bend. And that's nice for acoustic guitar because with a real bend, I have to like aim for a certain note and stop exactly when I get there. So that's the problem with this. If I can't quite get there, it doesn't quite sound right? But with a pre-bend, we get the sound of the bend, and since we're releasing to where the tension of the string wants to sit, we usually get them in tune. Okay, so I think pre-bends are cool. I think that's a good way to do it. Lots of different options for that one note, okay? So you got the option to bend up to the 12th fret if your string gauge is able to do it. You got the option to slide up from 12 to 14. You have the option to do the pre-bend where you bend 12th fret and then you come back. Or you have the option to go down to the 8th fret and do the full step bend. Or you have the option to stay right here and do my little ending I made up. Okay? So lots of different options for that little ending section, okay? And now I want to tell you something else that I did differently when I learned this song without really knowing at the time. But this part here, okay, those are thirds. And now intervals have this funny thing where they invert to different intervals. Okay, and we'll talk about that. That's kind of worthy of its own conversation if you don't understand this. But anyhow, the interval, the third, inverts to the interval, the sixths. Okay, so what that means is I can switch these two notes around. So the notes I'm playing are D and F sharp. Okay, I can switch those around. I can leave the F sharp right where it is, but instead of playing the D lower than the F sharp, I can find a D higher than the F sharp. Well, hey, I found the D on the 10th fret earlier when we did that method, right? It's still on the 10th fret way up here on the high E as well. That's also D, right? So instead you can do it like this. Alright? 11 on G, 10 on high E. That's called a minor 6, this interval. And I'm doing a pinch, okay? I'm using my finger and my pick to pluck like that. This one is getting the high E and the pick is going down on the G. Okay? So we can invert this C. That's actually the same shape. This one here, we see it goes down to the exact same shape. That's going to be the case here. We go 2 frets lower, we can keep the same shape. This is an inversion of that little C shape we had earlier. An outline of a C chord, an incomplete C chord known as an interval or a dyad. Okay, and then when we get to that last one, that one, we had B and then D. So now we keep the D where it is and we add the B over here. And I use these fingers, 2 and 3. That lets me keep 3 on the string. 1 uses that and then 1 gets out of the way and 3 comes in when they're on the same fret. That's why I like those fingers. Otherwise you get awful turned around trying to do this move. It's much easier to keep that one on the string. Boom. Okay, but we'll do a whole lesson on sixths at some point as well. Those are very important. Very cool things to be aware of on the guitar. So even though he doesn't do that in the solo, that's the way I had always done it. Okay, so that was my variation of the solo. Using sixths and also using the different little ending. Okay, so one more time I'm going to play it for you the real way. And let's see, I think I'm going to use the bend on the 8th fret since that will get closest to the sound. Even though I'm doing it on a different string, I think. I'm not positive where he does it, but I'm pretty sure he does it here with lighter strings. I'm going to do it here so it'll sound more like his way. So here, I'll play it the Brad Noel way first, and then I'll play it again the way that I do it with a few little alterations, okay? Alright, ready? Okay, cool. Now I'll do it the way that I do it, with the sixths instead and with the different little ending that doesn't involve the bend. Life is too short, so love the one you got, right? Cool. Okay, so either way is cool. You could even make your own little ornamentations to this. But just a super easy, fun little solo. Short little chunks that we can kind of dig into over time. So feel free to pause this video, rewind it. You can even slow down. Go really slowly and just take it one chunk at a time, and hopefully you'll get this. All right, well, great job learning your first guitar solo in this course. Lots more lessons here on my channel with chords and different scales and things like that. So if you're just clicking in for the first time, please make sure to subscribe and check out some of the other videos I have on the page. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day, and I look forward to seeing you again for another guitar lesson really soon. Thanks again. Bye.